All right, welcome guys. Another episode of The Running Journey. I'm Rob Tatro. It's my brother Charlie. Today we have a very special guest. Let's give it up for the best triathlete Canadian right now in the country, from right here in Manitoba, from Oak Bluff, Manitoba, Tyler Mislawchuk. Tyler, this is where the crowd would applaud, or we would
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Put in some fake applause. I actually, the reason that you're here is actually I saw you run in Paris. I went up, I got up, I went, I watched you run, and I screamed, Tyler, go Canada. And you, I don't know if you noticed or saw, but you kind of looked back and you waved. And I told that story at the office, and they're all like, well, reach out to him. Like, you got to get him on your show. So I reached out. Here you are on the show. We're thrilled to have you. You're obviously an elite athlete, #1 ranked Canadian. Right now, we got a whole bunch of questions for you, but maybe I'd just like to start by asking you about telling us a little bit about how you got into triathlon. Where did it start?
I think like most people, a friend tells you, or a friend of a friend, or you see something on TV. For me, it was someone my mom worked with was like super into triathlon at the time, and I was playing ice hockey like till I was about 16. Oh, sorry, I just say hockey, but I'm used to talking to internationals where you have to say ice hockey or they think it's field hockey or something like that. So, but yeah, I was playing AAA hockey till I was about 16, and I started doing it as a way to cross train. And I'm not the biggest guy. I'm like 5'9", maybe 135 pounds soaking wet. So not exactly a hockey build. And when I started doing it, I realized it's like, oh, I actually quite enjoy this. And I could actually be pretty good at this if I, put some effort in. So that's kind of when I first caught the bug. I did my first one in Morden in 2012, which, yeah, that's a long time ago now.
That was
not 2012, sorry, 2008.
How old would you have been back then? You must
So
have been young.
2008, I would have been like 13, 14. Yeah, grade 8, I believe I was. I was trying to qualify for Manitoba Summer Games, which they still have now. And I remember thinking I had missed the deadline for pretty much every sport, and looking through and was like, oh, I'd try triathlon. And I remember I signed up and was like, oh, I'll try to qualify because I'm just outside of Winnipeg, so a little bit less populated to make the team. And I think at the time, because it wasn't a mass participation, I think there was 3 people racing, and I had to finish top 2 or something like that, where I had to beat one other kid. And I remember I signed up, a month out, and then even the night before the race, my friends were going to a movie, and I wanted to go to the movie, and my parents were like, well, you signed up for this triathlon, and it's like 4 a.m. tomorrow. We're like, you gotta choose. And my parents, that was one thing they were good at. They always made me, if I signed up for something or chose to do something, I had to stick it out. That was something I'm grateful for now, and it's kind of one of those things that rubbed off on me, I would say.
Where were you playing AAA hockey?
Outside the city. Like, I'm from Oak Bluff, Manitoba, so we have all the regions of around. So it's like Oak Bluff, LaSalle, Sanford, pretty much everyone within like a 50K radius of there. We were all playing on a team together. Yeah.
Charlie played some AAA hockey in that league. That's why I was asking. Charlie played for Eastman.
Well, I'm a lot older, yeah. But yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I wanted to get in shape, I remember, and I started running a little bit, but wasn't as talented as you are. So,
do you remember what you did? Same thing. What your time was for that first race? Do you remember your time for that first race?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, I couldn't tell you. And the race would have been so short. It would have been it was in a pool, I believe. It was probably like a 150 meter swim, a 5 or 10K cycle, and probably like a 1500 meter run, which is actually like the super sprint distance we do now. But the only difference is now it feels super short, and then it felt like I was out there for 2 days. I remember being on my Walmart mountain bike, going down the highway, just waiting for it to be over, because I didn't love cycling when I first started. Running was always something I enjoyed. It was like, just get me to the run. Same thing with swimming. It was like, if I could have wore water wings, I think I would have. I was a terrible, terrible swimmer.
So I guess you yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Go Charlie, go.
Yeah, the transitions. I guess first one, you just kind of did it like, I guess, shoes just straight off the bike, I'm guessing, and things like that.
Oh yeah. Well, for the first few years, I remember having, baskets of just stuff that I would think now is like, my transition has like 2 or 3 things, barely anything. Back then I had baby powder that I put on my feet and then put socks on after, and then, take my time. I'd sit down, and it's funny to think now, like I'd be curious. The results are so, I went to try to find them on Triathlon Manitoba, but they're so old, they've been erased from the database. And I was trying to find them because I was curious. I was like, how much time did I spend in that transition versus now we come in and, it's the racing I do now is so competitive that, 2 seconds can make a difference between like winning and coming fourth place in a race sometimes. So I actually did, when I talked to you last week, Rob, I actually went and tried to look and find if I could find the results, and they are erased.
Yeah, I did one back in 2000. I couldn't find the result. You finished 13th. Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask that question, but my follow-up is like, I'm really interested in those races, those competitive races that you do now. Like, they seem so tight. What do they do? Like, it seems like maybe drafting would be a thing that would, like, because you guys must be just so close together. Like, I haven't really watched those.
It's a
like
peloton. Like, you guys are all just in a pack.
Yeah. So essentially, like, all of my racing is draft legal racing, and that started. Got it. That started in early 2000s, where they made that a thing, because essentially what happened is that these big pro races, the level of competitors was just too close, and so it's almost they couldn't stop the drafting at the shorter distances, at like the sprint and Olympic distance. Even watching some 70.3 world championships and elite, it's just so compact that they almost have a hard time keeping you separate. So what they ended up doing for the shorter distances, especially on a pro level, because they were so close, is like, okay, you guys draft. And then, that again changes the whole strategy of how I train, how I pretty much do everything, because being on a road bike in a big group, in a big peloton, it's a lot more dynamic. And the power is basically the opposite of approach of you would take to an Ironman, in terms of it's very like up and down. The normalized power is crazy. It's sporadic, and it's a little bit more chaotic when you're riding around sometimes with 10 guys, but sometimes if the whole field's there, it's 65 guys in one group trying to make it around, the tight streets of most of the European circuit.
Yeah. So it must be just like, people will make their moves and stuff, and you gotta follow. And
essentially with the style of racing now is you win the race on the run, but you can lose it on the swim and bike.
Yeah.
And the level of swim and bike is so high that even if you're a pure runner, you can't make it through. Even in the last like 10 years, it's interesting. The U.S. has such a big program of NCAA, like the NCAA sport system, and across every sport is crazy. But what's interesting is the amount of Olympic level runners that will come into the sport for the U.S. into triathlon, and they can run 13:30 or sub 28 minute 10K races, but they can't convert into the triathlon, even though it's won on the run, because the level is just so high on the swim and the bike.
And do more of them fail? Like, of those, do more of them fail on the bike or the swim?
I think the swim is the hardest component. I mean, as you guys probably know, swimming is it doesn't always make sense. The more you try, the faster you don't always go. It's a tough one, and swimming's so technical. It's versus biking is, you spend more hours, you get fitter, you're out there longer. Usually the better you get, as long as you recover and take care of your health, like you're going to get better on the bike. And similar with running, if you stay healthy, the more you run, the faster you run, the better you get. Swimming is not like that. It's such a technical sport. Even now, like for me, I have a cap on how much I swim in a week, because if I swim over a certain amount, I find my technique gets a bit sloppy, and then I don't actually improve my swimming. Versus biking and running, I can basically, the more volume I do, the better I get, as long as I'm staying healthy and recovering outside of training sessions, which is like nutrition, physio, all that type of stuff makes a big difference, obviously.
Can you take us through your PBs real quick before we get into further questions? I just want to know kind of where, for any listeners out there, what's your PB on a triathlon, and then for the different the different pieces.
Yeah, for myself, we don't do times overly in triathlon because it's draft legal and the courses are so different.
Okay.
But I think I've gone low 140s for an Olympic distance triathlon. A sprint distance, I've gone, under 50 minutes before, like 47 minutes, something like that. The racing's quite dynamic. So the times matter less as you're racing the actual people. But for individual disciplines, for 5K, I could probably run right now around 13:45 for 5K. 10K about like probably 28.5 minutes. And I think for a half marathon, if I train for it, if I give me a month now, I could run just over an hour, or pretty close. I think, 102, 103 maybe for a half marathon. So, that's definitely my strength. I'm a smaller guy. And so, biking, my watts are never nearly as impressive because I'm 61 kilograms. But typically when I'm in shape, for anyone who knows bike, is I can push for about 20 minutes over 6 watts a kilogram. So if you're 70 kilograms, it's over 400 watts. If you're 60, it's over 360. If you're 80 kilograms, it's over 460. So again, the bike, you don't win it on the bike. And then for swimming, probably for the last time I did a time trial was a 400 meter time trial. And I think I swam 4:16 for 400 meters. But for us, like, all these times are great, but it's figuring out how to work the puzzle together, because you're never going to be doing those best times at the same time. And it's figuring out how to combine the 3 sports. Again, that's what draws so many people in with triathlon, is that it's like this never ending learning cycle and trying to fit the puzzle together. Even triathlon, compared to many other sports, is so new that I feel like coaches, athletes are still just learning constantly, versus even with, like, let's say athletics or swimming, there's a longer history in the sport. And I feel like they're closer to, the peak of the sport, versus I feel like triathlon still has more room to go within the peak, because we're still learning how to, maneuver the sports science with 3 different sports and how much the body can handle and recovery and, all that jazz.
Yeah. There's a higher, like the traditional sports, there's a higher amount of known science, like percentage known. Like, you'll never know everything about something, right? But like for triathlon, there's a lot of unknowns that people could experiment with, I guess, and try, right?
Yeah. And I think the big thing is, like, the longer something's been around, the more people have tried and failed at something.
Yeah.
And you can try and fail once, but if there's multiple coaches or multiple different athletes tried and failed, it's kind of just a testing system. It's just like, even if you're making a running shoe, and you're never going to make the perfect running shoe on the first go. It's going to take, multiple, light running shoes they're on their 100th model, and they're just continue to get better, because you can never nail it the first time. It's kind of even like racing a triathlon. There's no hope that you're ever going to nail your first triathlon. You could do pretty good, but no matter how good you do, you're going to be like, I could have done better there, because there's just so many rooms in triathlon for crazy mistakes. Bike crashes alone. Like, I think I've had some nasty bike crashes over the years, and like that alone is like a piece to the puzzle for myself, because we're riding again in big pelotons. I've broken my jaw, broken my wrist. I've got probably over 40 stitches. I've got, I've all these teeth in my front are fake. I'd definitely be better off without a group peloton, but yeah, it's different pieces of the puzzle.
Go ahead, Charlie, or I'll go.
Yeah. Sorry, I've been thinking about something like relating to the different sports and theory and like the common like attitude that like people like us have, like that are like, not so good, like, but just kind of love the sport, is like age groupers like me, is like the common wisdom is don't spend too much time training for swimming. I think that's kind of the prevailing attitude, but that's like my weakest thing. And like I was thinking, and I was looking at the times, and the difference between me and like you guys, that's where to me there's the most opportunity. So like my theory was next year if I care about triathlon, I should spend like a few months just like focusing on swimming, like doing the opposite of what everyone says,
the Costanza,
for a while. But I'm probably wrong. So anyways, so that was kind of a thing that I thought, because the bike and the run, like it comes a little bit easier for me, but the swimming is kind of hard. So
swimming is one of those things, especially if you start later, it's harder and harder to do. But if I was like, let's say I'm your coach, and you tell me that, the first thing I would say to you would be like, rather than focus on swim fitness, you need to focus on your technique first.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things. So one of the things I was when I joined Gary Powell, who runs MTC, like the junior elite program out of Manitoba now. And I trained with him, who's still coaching. And when I came in at 15 or 16, my 400 meter time was, I did one the first day and I was 650 something. And within a year, Gary got me to 455. So I took almost 2 minutes off my 400 time in a year. And basically the first 3 months that I swam with them, all the other kids were in the normal pool swimming. And there was 2 or 3 of us who really didn't know how to swim. And most of them were younger kids. I remember one of them, he was a 12-year-old at the time named Darian. And we went into the deep end and basically just worked drills, technique for basically 2 or 3 months, where we basically almost did, the only swimming we did would be like a 50 or 100. And it was like perfect form until we, reintroduced swimming. Because the one thing you learn is if you haven't swam a ton, then you're almost better off because your brain is able to learn a new technique. It's almost like if you've been swimming for 50 years with bad technique, it's very hard to change. One, because as normal humans, we're stubborn. And 2, it's like muscle memory. So one of those things, I was lucky that even though I started late 16 versus most of the kids who start early swimming, I hadn't swam much. So I didn't really have a wiring of how to swim. It'd be the same thing if you never played basketball and you go to shoot a basketball, you have terrible technique. You're almost better off because you've never shot a basketball, you can learn from fresh, versus if you've been shooting bad technique for your whole life, it's a lot harder to make that adjustment. It's not impossible, but a lot harder.
You won some pretty big races. I'm reading your Wikipedia page. It tells me that you were like right before the Olympics, last Olympics, you either you came in hot or you had some really good races, or you were really, really well trained, but you won a big race in Mexico, I believe, and you won another race, if I'm not mistaken, right? 2 races you won right around the Olympics.
And you won the prep or whatever, the one before Tokyo.
So the equivalent of what you just seen, the equivalent of what you just seen me race in Paris, I actually won in Tokyo.
Yeah.
So I won that 2019, and then we had COVID. We weren't allowed to leave Canada really, and the rest of the countries in Europe were racing, but I didn't race. And then I essentially didn't race. And then that year before the Olympics in January, I moved to Hawaii for 5 months because it was almost zero COVID. It was safe there. And then it was stinking hot, which Tokyo Olympics was supposed to be. So my plan was I'm going to go live there with a few training partners, train my butt off and come out. And I raced twice before the Olympics, and both races I won that year. So, but one of the things that I did in that process of going to Hawaii and that is I trained really, really hard. I remember my coach and me sitting down, and for context, I had gone to the Olympics in Rio in 2016 as the youngest guy in the field. And I come 15th, but in that race, I actually broke my femoral neck. So I had broken it before with a stress fracture, and I hadn't got a scan yet, but I raced and came 15th on a broken femoral neck. So this Olympics, coming in a little bit more experience, but probably not in my golden years as I would say I'm now. But my coach sat me down, and I remember December before that year, and he said, okay, we can train 2 ways. We can train a safe way, and, you'll be in the mix, probably, top 8, but it'll be tough to win. Or we can train a way that, you're going to try to win the Olympics, and we're either going to win or we're going to fail, and there's no in between. And I remember choosing that I wanted to train to win the Olympics, which we did. And we trained pretty crazy, and we trained very aggressively. And at the top level of sport, there's very little room. You're walking a balance beam between injury, sickness, and being the best shape in your life. And for me, I was in the best shape of my life, better than when I won the Tokyo test event. I think I was, 30, 40 seconds better over 10K. I was 20, 30 watts stronger and, stronger in the water. On paper, if I run that race 10 times in my head, that I get a medal. But about 4 weeks before, I felt a ting in my Achilles, and the next day never walked properly again for about a month before. And then I raced the Olympics, came 15th, but I obviously had something wrong with me. I didn't really want to get it completely checked out, and I got been scanned the next day, and I had I tore my Achilles. So I raced on a torn Achilles and came 15th. So Two bittersweet Olympics for me. One as the youngest guy, I was stoked anyways, finished 15th, but I finished 15th again. But if you go back and watch that footage, it's on YouTube. I'm with the leaders until 4.5K out of 10K on the run. But if you watch me and you know me as an athlete, you can see I'm running peg legged, and I'm running with just like a dead foot basically on one side because my Achilles is completely gone.
In a 30-55, not too bad.
Okay, but wait, I gotta.
Well, that's crazy. That's a good result. Like either way, that's amazing. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously incredibly proud of you as a Canadian and as a Winnipegger or Manitoban, we'll say. To have you in our backyard is pretty neat. But I do want to pursue this point a little further. 2024, the Olympics are coming in Paris. You're a winner. You've won. You've trained hard. Do you think where are you relative to that? Are you going to get a medal? Do you have some goals? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm in better shape than when in previous years. I think the level of sport has gone up. And so right now on my good day, I think I'm missing, 15 or 20 seconds over 10K to be in the hunt for medals. Which 15, 20 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but at this level, it's a decent amount, but it's not insurmountable. And that's me being realistic. It's not like blowing smoke or anything. Like, it's like I sat down with my coach last week and was like, what do we need to find? And it's 15 to 20 seconds over 10K, which is very possible. One of the things with an Achilles tear, if you watched any of your, sport players growing up, they're never quite the same. In the first year they come back after an Achilles tear. It's just almost impossible to have the confidence in your leg that it's not going to blow out or do something. So, I mean, I'm a basketball fan. So even for me, like there's tons of players who have blown out their Achilles, and the year after they're kind of average, and then they come back stronger and stronger and stronger because they gain that confidence back. So much of an injury is mental as well. And so I feel like I'm building through it. Last year was a rough year for me. This year, I haven't been outside the top 15 in 7 races this year, but haven't had that breakthrough performance. And I feel like I'm on the edge of that. I just, sometimes all you need is one race, and that's kind of what I'm waiting for now. My fitness is there, and sometimes you need a race to fall in order for your confidence to line up with where your fitness is, I find. So definitely I wouldn't be still training or continuing to push as hard as I do every weekend if I didn't think I could win a medal or at least a shot at it. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me fired up. There's no way you could wake up every day and train like I do unless you had something bigger, for sure.
Tyler, how many months away is it? The Olympics?
It's July.
Yeah, it's about like 10.5 months. I think we're sitting at right now.
Yeah. So there's still lots of time, I guess.
Yeah, and one of those things is I went into the tester and I hadn't done altitude before, just with the scheduling and having to race before. And altitude is, if you do it right, it can be 20 to 40 seconds over 10K. So that's where I'm up here right now in Flagstaff, Arizona. And that's I plan to spend a lot of time up here. It's 7,200 feet or 2,100 meters. So,
is the plan to stay up there and then like on the race day, like 2 weeks before or something, or a week before or something?
I think the hypothetical plan right now is to come down about 3 weeks before into some hot weather in Spain, and then transfer over to France just to make sure that the heat isn't a shock. Because obviously at altitude it's a little bit chillier. Even though I'm in Arizona, it's still not really warm, which Paris can get random heat waves. When we were there, it wasn't too hot, but Paris is infamous in the summer months with randomly can roll in. It can be 35, 40 degrees Celsius. So you kind of just got to cover all your bases. But yeah, I think being up here is like, it's kind of the final piece of the puzzle for me. It's one of those things that I haven't fully figured out. And when you do it, it's a valuable piece.
So I know my brother wants to ask you about training and training schedule. I know.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No. But before we get to training, I want to ask you one question about the Seine River. When I was there.
Oh, yeah. Did you actually swim in that? Or no?
The day after your race. So I saw you swim in it. And I know that if a kid falls in that, like they take the kid out and they take him to the hospital, right? Like if a child or a baby or an adult falls in that river, it's so dirty. So they canceled the race after yours. I believe it was either the women's or the para. I'm not sure which one it was.
They canceled the para, and then they also canceled at the Olympics, we also have a mixed relay, which goes woman, man, and you each do a miniature triathlon and pass the baton. but ours was or wasn't canceled, but it was made into a duathlon. So it's definitely something they're going to have to deal with. I think one of the things, like for me, one of the things is like, it's the Olympics, so I'm going to swim in it whether it's dirty or not. Like, so
Whether
for
yeah,
me,
from your perspective, I can see it that way. But like to me, like the Olympics got to be better than that. But yeah, anyways.
yeah, no, they definitely. I mean, I think they're panicking a bit because they canceled open water world championships the month before. So, I mean, the one thing with the river, and they've done so much. They have about 100 readers in there that we all got briefed on and everything. And so, one of the things that just depends because the river is obviously flowing quite strong. I mean, even in the race, like you can feel it, how strong it's coming. That sometimes it's bad and sometimes it's good. So, I don't really know it's not like it's
wait.
a lake.
Are you going like side current, down current, up current? Like
We go up current and then back. So it's hilarious. So we swam, the first buoy was 440 meters and we swam there in under 4 minutes.
440.
And then we were swimming 51 seconds, 100.
Yeah. So that's down, you mean, right?
Yeah. So we would swim 4 minutes out and it took us almost 8.5, 9 minutes to come back.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I guess some people don't like getting like a turd in their mouth while they're swimming, like
yeah. Again, I think like when we're talking about this, you're not actually getting physical things. It's bacteria or things like
or whatever. Yeah.
When you swim in there, it is no different than swimming at Bird's Hill or an ocean. Like it's just your head's in there, you can't smell anything, and it's dark. That's all you know.
When you're doing it, you probably wouldn't notice, right? But
no.
After it might be something you notice.
Yeah, and touch wood that I had nothing wrong with me, and none of the men in the field on our race day had anything wrong with them. So that's that's pretty good because normally in a triathlon we race in such big cities, like we race in infamous cities around the world, and in a circuit that we race, there's 7 or 8 races, and almost every race there's someone who gets sick after. So it's almost one of the only races this year that no one got sick after. Just because, as triathletes, again, as you said, you're pushing it to the limit all the time with your body. You're racing. If you're going to get sick, your triathlete's probably going to get something because their immune system's just so on the edge all the time from pushing it.
I
think the race we ran in Houston, Charlie, was known to have.
People got sick from that one. Yeah, for sure. I was sick, but I think that's just because I'm not used to that distance.
I want to ask you about your training because that's Charlie and I do a lot of training. Well, a lot of training for 2 regular dudes with jobs that have families that are trying to just, run Ironmans and run triathlons and stuff.
Yeah.
What did you do today or what was your big day this week? Or maybe take me through kind of your peak week. And when is that relative to your race? Would that be 3 weeks before? Would that be like,
yeah. So one of the things I race so much in a year, again, it's not the difference between me and Ironman is that I race 10 to 15 times in a year rather than once, twice, 3 times because the distances are, 50 minutes or an hour, 45. And I have to try to make a living from this. So there's prize money at these races. And so sometimes you got to do a few extra races, even if you'd prefer to maybe not push the season as long. I started my season March 1st. And the first race was in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. And I'm going to finish my season in Korea in 6 weeks from now. So it's a long season to stay, focused on. Typically, like an average week for me when I'm in a heavy training block will be anywhere from 27 hours to 33 hours a week. And those hours, everyone has different hours, but like sometimes they're inflated. But for example, if I go to the pool and I swim 4K, I'm putting it's probably taking me about an hour. So I'm putting an hour. I'm not putting some people will put 2 hours because by the time they do there, they stretch, everything. And so I have, 30 hours of like real training, which is quite a bit. And when I get into race season,
that's a ton.
Yeah. For example, this January, one of the focuses, so I was in Flagstaff this January and in altitude, everything's harder. It's harder to recover. It's harder to do volume. Your heart rate's like 15 beats higher every time you exercise. So you don't sleep as good. So, the rule of thumb up here is that you do 20% less than you normally do. For, most people who come up here or reduce the intensity a lot. In January, I did the first 3 weeks in January, I did almost 100 hours of training. So it's like 33 hours a week at altitude. And halfway through January, there was a snowstorm in Flagstaff. So I had to move some of my training inside. But I remember there were some days where I'd do, 3 hours on the bike inside, and then I'd go swim or run, and then I'd do 3 hours on the bike in the afternoon. So just crazy stuff like that.
So that's the key, 2-3 hour bike sessions.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that for your sanity. Please don't. But
indoors too. That's I finally did a bike indoor today, and it was the most awful thing.
Oh, if you want to make time go by slowly, it is the worst. And that's one of the things I'm lucky that because it is my full-time job, that I get to train in nicer places, and so I don't have to suffer usually a winter. Because I multiply it by 2 at least, an hour inside, 2 hours outside for me mentally. But
same.
Typically in a week I'll do 2 hard runs, 2 hard swims, 2 hard bikes, and then a lot of easy endurance training on top of that. I think that for me at the shorter distances, my intensity when I do these sessions is quite high. Like I can give you an example. Please. This is a run session I did last month. And so anyone who knows running could know this. It was a VO2 session, so very high end but short, where I did a 1,500 meter repeat and then equal rest, and then a 1,500 meter repeat and then equal rest, 1 kilometer, equal rest, 500 meters, equal rest. And so the idea was to really, work on my top end. And for those, I ran 3:59 for a first 1,500. And then I ran four flat on the second 1,500, and then I ran 2:37 for a kilometer, and then 1:14 for the 500, which is under 60 seconds of 400. So it's not only volume, but it's very high intensity. So it's very difficult actually balancing the two and knowing how much is too much. As I said, I've run into that problem before of doing too much and injuring myself or getting into sickness. But for me at this point, at the top level, I've come 15th at the Olympics. I've won big races that I've done a lot, but so for me, it's not so much doing it to, compete. I'm trying to compete to win. So that's the difference, where I play in a bit of a risk zone that some of the other athletes may not. And you have to evaluate as yourself. For me, like I have to evaluate what my, baseline talent is, training 20 hours a week versus the others. And maybe an athlete could train 20 hours and be world class, but I can't. I have to be able to push the barrier as much as I can if I want to, be competing against the best guys in the world.
I think that's a ton of training. I think it's a ton of training. So do you enjoy more the kind of long 3-6 hours outside on a bike, or do you enjoy those 1,500, 500s? Charlie, I'm curious about you. What do you prefer?
Oh, I love doing this. Like, to me, it'd be
the speed work, the high end work.
Yeah, it'd be much slower, but those are fun to do. But I don't do them I'm sure I don't do them as often as you do. Me, it's like once a week at the most, right?
Yeah, same here.
But because I don't do them that often, when I do, it's like a treat.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
How about you, Tyler?
No, I think you also get the endorphins, right? Which we're all familiar with after that session. And it's the being able to compare yourself. I mean, again, for me, I have training partners, but I don't even compare myself to them. It's very much like comparing myself to myself last week or the week before or whatever. And so I think I get a kick out of that, competing against myself. I will say the long endurance stuff has grown on me over time as a younger athlete or newer into it. I didn't enjoy it as much, but I think being in the right places also helps with that. Like in Flagstaff, I have a gravel bike, I have a road bike, but there's unlimited amount of fire roads here. Or, I spent 2 months in Spain this summer, so I'm a bit spoiled, where you go on the roads and you go on these massive hill climbs and everything. It makes it quite a bit more enjoyable just to, get the base miles in, because you're not doing the same loop constantly. When I'm in a place, I do the same loops, but I get at least a bit of change of stimulus, which helps with, again, the long hours week in, week out.
But you definitely built your endurance as a youngster at the Birds Hill Loop, 11.1 kilometers.
Yes, sir. I built it there, and I built it on country roads, dirt roads on my mountain bike growing up too. I've got a few funny stories on that. I think the last time I rode my mountain bike in Winnipeg, it was might have been December, and I think it was like minus 20 degrees Celsius out. And I rode from my house in Oak Bluff to Beaudry Park. I'm not sure if you're familiar, on my mountain bike. And then I ended up crashing in Beaudry Park, and I couldn't use the bike, and pulled out my iPhone to call my parents or someone, and my iPhone was when it turns off because of temperature.
Frozen. Yeah.
And I was like, shoot, okay, well,
I might die here.
no one's out in Beaudry Park in December, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
So I had to walk I think it's 13K home with my bike, but I ran it. So I ran it in like my snow boots, and I remember by the end my eyes were just frozen shut. I got home, and I had frostbite at pretty much every part of my body you can imagine. And I don't think I've rode my mountain bike in Winnipeg since. It was a bit scarring, but it's one of those ones that character builds for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, I always said that if you're stuck in the cold, start running a bit so that it'll warm you up.
Yeah, the running definitely better on the feet. Biking's again much worse in the cold weather, no matter where you are in the world, especially if it's wet.
Do you have ambitions other than triathlon? Have you ever tried ultras or I don't know, anything else that you want to do in the sport or kind of similar sports, gravel biking, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that catch my eyes. I was thinking about it the other day, and one of the things is actually probably, I'll ride a TT bike, and I'll definitely have to give my crack at a 70.3 before I hang up the triathlon suit. But one of those things is running. I've always been curious, and I'd be curious now, even post 2024, how close I could get to making a world's team or something like that for running, whether it's in the half marathon, or like 5K, 10K steeple.
Well, when you were saying your times, like that's close to world class, what you were saying. Like, I mean, you must be there, right? So
yeah, and these guys are better than me, but I've never had a focused period of just running in my life. And it's not saying that I could do it, but I'd be curious to try and at least give it a good push.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, well, I
guess running's you can probably like age-wise, like I would imagine Olympics, it's pretty young guy. I mean, you're still young, but I mean, running probably longer career. I would imagine, like half marathons.
Yeah, a lot of endurance athletes in the marathon or triathlon, you seem to, I think, even Olympics, a lot of the medals won are early 30s, which I'm 29 now, so I'd be competing at 30 at the next Olympics. But also, these are things that, depending on what you do, is different time. Right now, what I do is a crazy amount of time. Like, I have no time to do anything else other than train, basically, and take care of myself, because it's 32 hours of training, but that's actual hours. Yeah. Then you add commuting in that, I'm probably up to like 50 hours. And then you add like physio and meal prep, I'm up to like 60 hours.
Making food must be a big activity.
Yeah, food itself is a big problem, and it's something that is a challenge of the sport. Once you train that much, is actually eating enough, and eating enough that's healthy. That's not garbage, because it's easy to eat garbage, which I have to sometimes. But the hard part is eating enough good food and prepping it and all that. It's a full-time job almost on itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
it's a lot of chicken breast.
Yeah. Yeah, more of a steak guy myself, but
Charlie, otherwise I'm going to ask you some rapid fires. Charlie, do you want to go somewhere here?
I've got a couple rapid fires too.
Okay, you go first.
What type of shoes do you wear for an Olympic?
Nike Vaporflies.
Oh, those are
just
awesome.
Like us.
Those are
great. Once you wear them, you can't go back. It's tough.
Charlie, are you?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 of them. So first off, if you could talk to either a young version of yourself, or perhaps more like one of our listeners who's kind of maybe just getting into the sport, one piece of advice that you'd give them, someone who's not an elite athlete, but someone who's either starting out or taking up the sport, piece of advice.
I'd say find like-minded people to start your journey with. I think whether you're the same ability as them or not, I think finding people to show up at the pool at the same time, to start a ride at the same time, to keep you accountable. Plus, it just makes it a lot more fun, I think, when you're sharing the journey with other people and You're kind of in the trenches together, go for a long ride and you're both just exhausted at the end. It's hard to relate to someone when you come home when you're that tired, but having that person in the trenches with you and being able to laugh with them, have a fun time, it makes the painful training a bit less painful.
Well, that's like Charlie and I. That's all we talk about now is our training and our running and our races whenever we get together. I would definitely agree. Question about the biggest hack that a rookie or me and Charlie might not know about running Olympic distance race. Biggest hack that you can think of. That's like probably an easy tip that we might not know. So we're running races. We're trying to shave minutes, not seconds.
It's just 2-3 hour bikes in a day. That's not an easy.
That's
hack.
The hack.
Yeah. I think the hack for anything triathlon related is focusing on the easy things that aren't training that make you faster, and whether that's having a proper breakfast and figuring out what like if you can just not cramp in a race, right? Like how many minutes you save, whether you nail your nutrition. So one of the things like I think is an easy thing for beginners to knock time off or to save mishaps minutes is just figuring out your nutrition while you train. Because if you do that, you're instantly ahead of most of the people who are starting, because most of the people, including myself, I still get cramps randomly and sometimes they're unavoidable. But I feel like as a beginner, you're already a step up if you can avoid, grabbing your stomach because you need to go to the washroom because you ate something bad or gel didn't agree with you or whatever. I think it's an easy one.
Nice. Charlie?
Yeah, so you had a 29 second, your T2 is 29 seconds. How do you get these Vaporflies on so quick?
So I've played around with them quite a bit, but there's obviously elastic laces, which is what most triathletes would have. But
that's what I have, but it's hard still. I don't know. Anyways.
So I'll rub a little bit of Vaseline on the tongue, on the inside of the tongue. So where your foot is actually hitting the shoe will slide in easier. I think baby powder for me doesn't work as well, but a bit of Vaseline on the tongue and even the touch of the heel. Again, not the heel where you're running, but the top where your foot is coming in contact. It helps me to slide in a bit easier.
What about the best strategies you have for overcoming that block that you have in a race where you can't go anymore? You're actually mentally not able to continue. Do you have tips and tricks for people who are listening that have a hard time with the mental aspect?
I mean, yeah, the mental aspect is every single athlete, every single level is going to go through a hard patch or many hard patches in a race. It's how quickly you can bring yourself back to what you're doing, right? How many times in a race, even when I'm having a good race where my mind starts to take me somewhere else and you go, this is too hard, you've blown up, give up. And then how quickly you can bring yourself back. And one of the things that I like to do is just literally focus on the smallest little increments. And whether it's sprint distance, super sprint, Ironman, sometimes picking the next tree or pylon in front of you and just going, right, just get to there, one of my guys I train with also, a good friend of mine, South African guy, he always says 20 seconds of courage, which I really like. 20 seconds to be brave, to push, and then I'll reevaluate in 20 seconds. And then you maybe do that 2 or 3 times, a minute's pass, and then you might have gone through like what could have been the rough patch, because we all know from training and racing, sometimes a rough patch is 1 minute, sometimes it's 10 minutes, but they will eventually, if you've again done nutrition right and little things like that, it will go away. It will subside. And if it doesn't, then you got to go 20 seconds all the way to the end.
Yeah. I love that. 20 seconds of courage. My favorite quote in the Terry Fox book that's on my bookshelf is, he never ran across the country. He never ran a marathon a day. He ran to the next post all the time. And our dad used to say that to us when we were kids, right? Just run to the next post. You're just running to the next post when we were doing 3,000 meters or 5,000 meters.
Yeah, that's mine the exact same. I grew up when I first started running, when I was playing hockey, my dad and me would go out on the road and we would do, again, we didn't know what we were doing back then, but we would do like a 2 or 3K run and we go from, one light post in my neighborhood to one light post, and we go hard between one and then easy between. And now I know that's a fartlek, but at the time we were just running from post to post. And so that's why in my mind, it's always like a light pole, even though there's not many light poles sometimes in the course, it's a pylon. But for me, it's the exact same. It's just run to that next light post and then reevaluate.
Did you actually ran with your dad on some of these when you were young?
My dad was on his bike.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Even early.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because you would have been too fast.
And I remember even back then it was something, again, without knowing I was doing what we're talking about now then, and now I just know how to say it out loud versus then I wouldn't have known how to, tell you guys.
Wow.
Awesome. Charlie?
Oh man, great talk. Do you know Philip Chabot?
We're playing this game, the Do You Know People in the French Community game?
Maybe not.
I might.
Okay, never mind. He used to coach triathlon. I thought maybe he's a bit older than you.
See, yeah, I think with triathlon, you know the names, but you haven't met a lot of people because it's such a small community.
Yeah.
Do you get the crashes after kind of big races, after you've been training so hard? Do you get like the dopamine crash or and how do you deal with that?
Definitely. It's dopamine. There's a lot of research into it, actually, even in the hormonal side of, like, you go into a race for me, and whether I race good or bad, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after, I'm going to feel like garbage. Whether I didn't finish the race, whether I won the race, it's just such a buildup. It's like your body's almost getting ready for war, getting ready for battle. And, you're getting amped up for it. And whether it's good or bad, you kind of have that crash after. But one of the things I've done in the last few years, and I've had some rough patches, like really rough patches in my career. I've had really good patches, but one of the things is, like, it's a good race Monday morning, you train. If it's a great race on Monday morning, you train. And if it's a terrible race on Monday morning, you train. And if it's an awful race, you still train. And so that's kind of one of the things that has kept me going. And probably, I've been, as you said earlier in the show, I think I've been ranked top Canadian, or top 15 in the world since 2015. So that's 8 years being top 15 in the world. And I don't think I would have got here without that kind of mentality of, like, all right, good day, bad day. Like, I mean, it's just like anyone. You get up and you got to go to work. For me, you got to go to work Monday morning, and you got to figure out a way to get better. Whether you won the race or you lost, you got to figure out a way to get better, because there's always someone waiting to, take your spot in elite sport, or someone who's always willing to work just as hard or harder than you. If you keep that in your head, then I think it's a good way to stay out of trouble.
Man, we listened to our episode that we recorded. We were trying to qualify for Boston, Charlie and I, for him his whole life, and for me my whole life, but I never thought I'd ever get there. We finally get there. We finally qualify for Boston. We finally run the race of our lives. 2:55 he ran, 2:56 I ran. We recorded an episode. Charlie, you should go listen to the episode. Have you ever?
Yeah.
Sound like we just came from our parents' funeral. Like, we're depressed. We're actively depressed. We recorded the day after. It is like terrible to see, or interesting to see what it does to the human psyche. We're like,
why do you think that was?
Well, because that dopamine crash we'd been building up for so long for this race. We did it. And again, like you said, doesn't matter if you have a good race, bad race, hormonal, whatever. We were just like, the 6 minute mile was tough, a mile 14 to 17. And we're just like, it's terrible TV. It's terrible audio, but it's very interesting. What I do, I always sign up for a race right after. I sign up for another race. I'm kind of addicted to signing up for races, and I just sign up for another race, and then I feel good about myself. I have something to look forward to. It's
funny because it's the first thing. If I have a bad race, my ideal scenario is that I race the following weekend, because then I can, race to forget almost. The toughest part is if you end your season, being like from North America, seasons end, November typically. At the latest, if you go even outside, and if you end with a bad one, it's very tough, because the earliest you could race, even if you go to like somewhere like Florida or something, is like March. Like, that is the earliest possible race, and for most people it's May or June. So it's a tough one to end. But then you kind of fight the urge of, like, well, if I end poorly, Do I have more fire in my belly to train harder in the off season? Versus if I end really well, then I'm going to be like, am I going to be complacent? But either way, no matter, like you said, either way, good or bad, the few days after a race is tough. And it's one of the things. I went to the Olympics in 2016 with another girl who's actually Manitoba. We had 2 Manitobans on the team, French Canadian girl named Sarah Ann Bro. And I trained with her as well for most of my career. She's retired now. And but I asked her, it was last year, the year before, and I said, what do you miss most about, triathlon and being a professional athlete? And she said that one of the things she missed the most was one of the things she hated the most while she was doing it was the emotional highs and lows that training and racing and sport bring you, because she said it just brought her such ups and downs. But that post sport, she doesn't, she's steadier, and you don't get quite the same crashes and elevations. But sometimes that's what makes life exciting, is those crashes and elevations,
That's why I do it, for sure, for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it actually, what you just explained kind of reminds me a little bit about hockey back in the day, where if you lost a game, you wanted to like play the next night, right? Like you wanted to.
Yeah, you didn't want to wait a week or a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Charlie, do you want to have a last question here? I do want to respect Tyler's time.
Yeah, no, I was curious about the cadence that, I guess because you're in a peloton, I don't know how you do cadence for cycling, or is there something that works better for running after? Or?
I mean, again, same with the power, the cadence is so undulating. For me, I do a lot of actually in training, a lot of big gear work to make myself kind of resistance to a lot of the torque spikes. So in and out of U-turns will have high spikes of power. So actually in training, I'll do a lot of low torque reps, sprints or tempos starting from a really low cadence to kind of robust myself. But in the race, I'll try to do the exact opposite, where you're trying to use a higher gear so you don't have to burn the muscle matches. My cardiovascular system is so well trained that I'd rather put the strain on the cardiovascular system than the low cadence gearing.
So that is a true thing. Then I was wondering if that was just my perception of it, but
no, totally.
Train in low cadence, race in higher cadence, and then especially if you like, my brother's super, like he's a lot. So I keep telling him he should be racing in higher cadence because he's aerobically he's a lot stronger. Anyways, but so that's the thing. That's true. Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just like anything, running, biking, swimming. It's finding what you are efficient in, because a coach can tell you a certain way works, but in the end, every human body is different. We all have similarities, but every human body is different, and finding a sweet spot of like, there's no X amount of strokes you need to be taking per 25 meters to be the perfect technique. Everyone swims different. Some, like at the high level, some people swim very high cadence, some people swim low, and it's finding your sweet spot and using your tools or your physicality to the best of your ability.
Okay, this will be the last question. I'm running in Nice this weekend at the Ironman World Championships. I'm guessing you've biked and probably jogged and swam that course or around there in that area. Do you have tips for me in those? I think there's like 20% hills, and I've never even come close to seeing anything like that.
Yeah, I think one of those things is the only thing nice about the really steep hills in that course is, I think if I were, if I were your coach, I'd be like, use the hills as a goal. You go through one hill and you get a recovery down a hill, and it's breaking up the race rather than thinking of it as this huge long race. You go, with pacing in mind is, all I got to do is this one hill, and then I get a recovery, and then all I got to do is this one hill, and then I get a recovery, and before you know it, you're getting off your bike. I think, yeah, it's a lot like that. But I think if I were racing personally, that's how I would look at it, and I look at maximizing speed on the downhills with the least amount of effort. That's what I would be doing. Would be like, how fast can I go on the downhills with the least amount of effort, or on the flats with the least amount of effort, so I can, not bleed too much time on the uphills. That's how I would look at it.
And how do you do that? Is that like just being in the right position on your bike? Is that
just making sure, like for example, like if you think about hydration or nutrition, you're least affected taking those products at a slower speed. So you're actually better to be taking a lot of your nutrition or hydration on an uphill because your speed is a lot slower versus the downhill is almost the time when it's like to stay aero, to do that, have a sip of water, have your nutrition, but knowing that you will slow. I mean, one of the things I remember hearing I work with bike specialists in the, world's road race or Olympic road race, the guys would drink water on the corners while they're braking because that was the best spot to lose the least amount of watts. And I don't recommend that for anyone to be taking water on a corner, but that was like, this is how they're trying to maximize. It's crazy what, the extents they would go to.
Oh, we lost him.
It was good. It was good timing. It was great.
I guess so. My strategy at Hecla of drinking waters right before the turns makes sense.
No, that's good. No, that's good. Man, there's so much there. We got to get back on the show.
We could have talked to him forever.
Yeah.
Sounds like
maybe we'll. Oh, there he's popping back. He's popping back in.
Sorry.
In. No worries.
My phone has overheated.
Your phone is overheated.
Wait, so your phone says you need to eat, probably?
Yeah, you need to eat. It's time for you to nutrition and hydrate, probably.
Something like that, eh?
Yeah. So here's what we'll do, Ty. This was fantastic. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you for an hour. We're gonna follow your career closely. You're gonna become a friend of the show. Obviously, you already are. But and we have been for a while. But now that we've talked to you, hopefully at some point when things slow down for you in the future. We'd love to get you back on maybe, next year or something when you have a bit more time. And when you left there just now, Charlie was saying, I could have asked him 500 questions. Cause Charlie's I'm way more into like, as you can maybe tell, Charlie's way more into data and science. And I'm more into like emotion, and he had to leave again, but that's okay. His phone's overheating. So we'll get him back on the show again. And I thought this was phenomenal for us to get him on here. Best Canadian triathlete over the last decade, winner. And, he was actually a legit favorite to win the Olympics, and he would have won probably, or would have had a medal if he had that.
I was going to say, we'll get him back on after he wins a medal at the Olympics.
Yes.